Hi.
Hello guys, good evening, welcome. We did a review last night of the first part of the Michael Jackson documentary. I mean, it's a huge thing, this really, isn't it? I mean, it is massive. I mean, we've all got, I mean, God, just seeing today, just the clips of the trial, we've all got memories of this over the decades.
Well, just before we go on to the programme, I just wanted to say, I think going into this second part of this chopped up documentary that's a 4-hour film, actually, it's actually a 4-hour film. I've read a lot of comments today, and I've seen a lot of press and a lot of coverage, and a lot of comments about our very watched review reaction last night. That's yours.
That's very sweet.
And I found myself querying my own assessment of the two contributors last night. And I found myself querying it because as soon as you feel anything with any conviction, I think it's everyone's duty to query and question where that's come from, you know, why I believe it, what vested interest I have in believing it, and what have you. And I thought there were times today where I was feeling very ill at ease with assuming that I could trust these two boys. And it made me realise how awful it must be for anyone coming forward who's suffered any form of abuse. And, you know, there having been a period of time between the abuse happening and them actually talking about it. All you're ever going to be met with is the refrain, why didn't you say something sooner? Like it's a simple solution. And what I liked about tonight's documentary, though like isn't the right word, was that the filmmakers very cleverly and very subtly brought in all the supporting cast. I mean, obviously the mothers were in the first half, but partners, the brother of one of the abuse victims, and the mothers. And for me, in many ways, the thing that absolutely sort of defined whether I believe Michael Jackson did what he did pivoted around not just the main two characters' testimonies, but their mothers. And the extended family, and their girlfriends and partners.
I mean, the partners were incredible.
I thought it was very clever the way it unwound and started to sort of spread the net of how abuse, like a pebble in a pond, causes these ripples of destruction. And what we saw tonight, in tonight's episode, though it's the same film, that annoys me as a director, it's a 4-hour film, but what you saw in these 2 hours was the sheer impact of those ripple effects on every member of the family. I mean, I thought the brother was so touching in the way that he can't forgive his own mother for letting, you know, and I think what you saw written within the faces of those mothers was a realisation of precisely what they'd let them in for, didn't you?
Well, it's interesting today because we did it on Loose Women, and, you know, people were talking about how there was so much hate on Twitter for the mums because they'd been laughing as they were telling the story and blah, blah, blah. And I'd been saying, well, you know, the thing is, what people have got to understand is, and it was you that was explaining to me to this, Mark, as a director, as a documentary maker, said what will have happened is they will have sat them down and said, okay, take us right back to the beginning. What happened? What was it about Michael and about Neverland and everything that enabled you to leave your children? And so take us back to the happy time.
You will say to them, relive it.
Yeah, take us back to the very beginning when everything, oh, well, you know, Michael called and we went to Neverland and it was the most beautiful place. And of course, what we saw in last night's documentary is that we were cutting opposite to that, these men telling this in horrific detail, their sexual abuse. So I felt very sort of almost protective of the mums today when I was talking about it, because I was talking about, you know, the fact that the entire family had been groomed, and that we have to wait and see what happens in this second part today. And for me, Jimmy's mum, I think, was totally 100% groomed. And of course, all this is our opinion, having watched a documentary, from watching these people. And I'm fascinated in the human condition. I'm fascinated in what makes people tick, and what, you know, how one person's, an experience that one person might have will impact in a completely different way if you had this, another person had the same. So this is all that we're talking about. You know, we don't know anything, but we're just fascinated by it. But tonight, I shifted a bit on that. And I felt Wade Johnson's mum, I felt was a different thing. I think the family had been groomed, but I'm sorry to say that in my gut instinct, I felt somewhere, some way, she knew what was going on.
Which one was Wade Johnson's mum?
Wade Johnson is the choreographer. The mum with the pink hair, the one who
Oh,
said, I
right.
didn't want to know the details.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what? I think you kind of, you owed him listening to the details of what happened to him. I mean, her head had been turned by the fame and everything. And I think, not consciously, but subconsciously, she knew what was going on. But I didn't feel that with Jimmy's mum.
Which one was... Wade was the...
Wade is the one who's the choreographer, who had this sort of Asian wife. I think she was sort of part Asian.
Yes.
And who was 5 years old, brilliant dancer.
See, Jimmy I thought was interesting because, interestingly, Maddie caught part of it and she said he doesn't seem very emotional. And
that's the way.
And that's the way. And then what I thought was quite telling and compelling was both of them talked about the process of becoming a father and how that became a moment of when they saw their children pass through the age. And it's interesting because I think what they're describing there is what every parent goes through. Not every parent, thankfully, has experienced abuse, though we've all experienced negative things. And what I've gone through with 4 daughters, even though they're not sons, is I've seen them go through certain ages, and you're always reminded as a parent of what you were doing at that age. So it makes total sense to me that at the point that they were looking at their own boys playing and doing things, it would have been like an arrow striking the heart for them to realise, hang on a minute, at that age I was doing this. And only then, really, would they have got a sense of how inappropriate everything was that was happening.
I've got a friend who was sexually abused, and she just talked about the absolute shame, the absolute humiliation and embarrassment of somebody doing that, and her not quite knowing whether that was right or wrong, and just being fearful because you're a child and it's grown up telling you that this is fine. Well, imagine that multiplied by 10 million because it is the God that's Michael Jackson. And she didn't tell anyone. She didn't tell anyone for decades. And, I think that came across really well today with both of them. When you saw them both find their partners, fall in love, and when Wade kept saying over and over again, it was completely incomprehensible that I would ever tell anyone. And he went to court twice and said that nothing had happened. And I believed, did you? I believed every word of what he said. I mean, I just did.
I mean,
people have got very angry with me today for believing
Well,
them.
a lot of people are very angry. I mean, I'm curious to know why people would choose to be of the two sides of the coin that there are here to look at. Why one would be so angry about the people who've been abused. It's like people are almost spitting more bile about that. Whereas people who are saying, yes, he was an abuser, or could have been an abuser, are still acknowledging he was a genius and all this. There seems to be such a sort of ardent sort of anger.
I think you can be both. I mean, I think so much in the world, we want everything to be one thing or another. I think he could have been a paedophile and also have been an incredibly talented superstar, which is what he was. He was both, in my opinion, he was both those things.
But for me, you see, I thought this documentary was a really clever, not clever in a sort of tricksy way, but it very gently illustrated to me, because I wanted it answered, why didn't they testify anything against Jackson at the trial? Why didn't they say anything? And I thought it painted an entirely genuine, I thought, I don't think I think it's very easy for all of us to just know the Jackson or know these public figures that we know and not actually know the intricacies or take time to understand the intricacies of what happens in abuse. Denial happens, denial of the abuse to yourself. Have we heard of Stockholm Syndrome? Stockholm Syndrome kicks in with everything. Children who have been abused can really care for their abusers.
Of course.
Really care for their abusers.
Of course.
It's not just about you hurt me, you abused me, therefore at the first opportunity I'm going to kind of jump off like shit like off a shovel and say what you did wrong.
The first time he touched either of them, he said to them, "This is me showing you how much I love you." Well, if you just hear, the problem is people hear this stuff through the mind of an adult. But if you're a child and you don't know what masturbation is or what touching a penis is, and somebody says, if you say this is love, this is love, or if you say this is love, why is a child going to question that? No. A 5-year-old, a 7-year-old is told you don't question an adult. Adults know everything. So I find it, I mean, I think it's understandable, but that we're all trying to feel our way around this and work out what the truth is. But what I don't find understandable is that people just categorically say they're just total liars. Because I think not only they, but the families and the wives would have had to be, we're talking about A-star actors, all of them.
I'm pleased you said that, because someone's just quoted you again as saying that on Loose Women today. You said it yesterday as well on the live. If these guys are all elaborating and lying, we've just seen probably an Oscar-worthy performance by a cast of 7 people, all sharing searingly honest portraits of their very different POVs on being victims of abuse. They were all victims of abuse, right down to the fathers that committed suicide. There was also the one of Geordie Chandler, was it the other guy? You know, I mean, this abuse. And this is the other thing. This is the other thing. Can I just say, this is the other thing that gets me. Okay, we might want to defend Michael Jackson. I've actually come out of the documentary tonight feeling really sad, yet again, about the decades of my childhood. Because yet again, another layer of so-called innocence that I thought was there and genuine sort of entertainment has been absolutely marred by revelations like this. It's a really depressing realisation. I don't want to know that Michael Jackson did this. But what's really weird is it's like I have almost a selective amnesia. All the footage of him going to court, we were both looking at each other across the room going, I remember that. He went in his pyjamas.
I remember thinking, I just believe that this happened.
Yeah.
I do believe. Todd the Bunny says, I'm angry people would unconditionally think these men are lying, probably because no one believed me when I was abused. People on the outside generally think abusers as heroes. Their eyes told the truth. I'm thinking of all the people that have been abused this week, actually, and thinking how incredibly difficult this is, because there's so much. People get so angry, don't they? It's like, where are all the rules and regulations? People go, why have they waited this long? Why?
I thought, and the guys that they had on YouTube on the documentaries spitting bile. I mean, you know, until you've walked in someone else's shoes, you can't really say. Now, you can never remove the prospect or possibility of the money or financial side to this story. But okay, let's grab the bull by the horns just in terms of the money side. Why did Michael Jackson pay 10 million?
Well,
out of court. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me, a little bit like with the Bill Cosby case, it never ceases to amaze me that we never ask a question. We just go, oh, well, it was an out-of-court settlement. But, you know, you do know why out-of-court settlements happen, don't you?
Well, yes, I was talking to a very, 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 very famous person last summer who was talking about how often things are brought up, like staff or people will accuse them of something. I'm trying to be really careful because I mustn't say who this person is. And they're clearly people trying to make money, and you just settle out of court because otherwise you're going to court, and then it's a big thing. So I think that does happen in show business. But I think that this, I just don't think that's the case in this situation. I really don't. 10 million. Wasn't it 28 million to Geordie Chandler? I saw something go up there, which apparently, I don't know whether this is true, but I'll look it up here, that apparently Geordie Chandler was able to describe in detail the underside of Michael Jackson's penis.
A number of people have been saying that this is the case, that he could,
Look that up.
There was a really moving quote, I thought, by the director of The Boys, where he said, I want to be allowed to speak the truth for as long as I've had to speak the lie. I thought, yes, in a weird way, even if you don't think it's the case, allow them that, because it doesn't harm you.
Well, when he said, do you mean when Wade said, you know, this has been incredibly difficult, the backlash, having to talk in such detail, which is humiliating for him, because he has that beautiful wife who he loves deeply. And he said, you know, but nothing is as painful as telling the lie. And the other one, Jimmy, seeing the manifestation of the man just like broken, and his wonderful wife, that gorgeous jolly wife that he had. And I actually had an enormous amount of sympathy for the wives today. But like Wade's wife said, you know, this sexual abuse was an explosion in our lives.
It was a bomb.
She was so. Could you have doubted that woman for 1 second?
No, not at all. I thought their experience of being married to the victims of abuse was so searingly authentic. A lot of people are saying, why are we not hearing from many other boys? That if so many children were passing through Neverland, why are we not hearing so much
I'm
more
sure
from so
he didn't
many others?
abuse every child
No,
that
exactly.
went through
I
Neverland.
think-
I'm sure he wouldn't. I mean, he would. I mean, the thing is, where I think maybe, you know, the tricky thing here was both these boys had parents that wanted them to be in show business. So it worked very well. They were groomable. A lot of people wouldn't have been, just because those people were able to go, yeah, here you go, and they can stay in your room and we'll travel around with you. Not every parent's going to do that. So it wasn't a case of...
Well, I haven't been abused, but I know people who have been abused. Yes, sorry, someone was just asking. So, you know, it does... There are parallels between, you know, certainly around the idea that a family, a surrounding family, can utterly disbelieve what's going on and in fact still encourage a compromising set of circumstances to continue. Yeah,
Serial killers don't
experience.
murder everyone. Yeah, exactly.
That's a very good point.
Really
Is
good
it that?
line.
Victoria Alice. Yeah,
Yeah.
serial killers don't murder everyone.
Yeah. Lots of people asking, they're quite nice, you know, what do we do? Do we listen to the music? You know what I think? I personally, in my opinion, I think if you still want to listen to the music,
I don't
then
think you should
what's
ban
wrong
it.
with that? We neither of us and our kids actually
No.
as well. We talked to them and think that it should be banned. I don't believe
I
in
don't think I
banning
could listen
anything.
though. Isn't it funny though?
I
I thought
just-
to myself, if I went into my room and pulled out an album of Thriller, I couldn't look at. I mean,
I
and
kept humming through
this is
today.
this
It kept coming into my head.
and be playing devil's advocate for the sake of sort of balance. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, about a non-court decided assessment is that, you know, everything about Michael Jackson has now been forever changed. I mean, and so you can see how some people would argue without actual substantive evidence. But I mean, it strikes me that we keep hearing from so many people there are all sorts of kind of red flags. I think red flags is a good argument.
Red flags, really good.
You've got to say after a number of red flags are held up, you've got to stop and go, hang on a minute. Go on, what were you
I
gonna...
love this from the big questions. I'm getting sick of people saying he's dead and can't defend himself. So is Jimmy Savile, and nobody argues. And listen, you know, the thing is, this is not a good enough reason for victims of abuse not to be heard. It is very important that people feel that they have been somehow vindicated, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, why
yeah.
should they keep silent? He said that very eloquently.
Yeah.
But that to finally, however difficult this is, it's so much easier than telling the lie. They've had the burden and had to endure everything they've had to endure, and then they're to continue to not say anything. I just think...
I would also hasten to add, and this is something that Maddie actually mounted as a defence against someone she was with yesterday regarding, you know, why didn't they come out sooner? Classic argument always, why now? Why is it now? Well, you could argue on this one, they did come out a few times before, and this is simply them coming out again. Whether there's going to be financial, reward sought after is another matter. But here's the thing. As a 40-something grown man, going into a room and sleeping with children
Let's just think about
let's
that.
just think about that for a minute. Isn't the greatest thing to be doing to try and instill confidence in us? So if this were to happen, if it was the case that, God forbid, we were all to say, it's a little bit odd, isn't it, Michael, that you're going into that room with those children? I would argue that going into a room with children on your own doesn't support your case. And almost by going into a room with a child on your own, unless you've propagated this myth of you never having had a childhood. I thought that was interesting, the way in which it was part of his whole image, wasn't it? He was the Peter Pan. He was the grown adult who'd never had a childhood. And there are lots of other bits and pieces of corroborating evidence from other people who worked in the Jackson sort of, in Neverland and what have you. But
I think there's a lot of people, somebody just said there about his inner circle as well. You know, there's been a lot said, hasn't there, about this cleaner that's
sure
there's somebody
everyone's
there
on
just
I'm
saying...
sure so many people are on NDAs.
Drunk atheist. She said, you know, she saw countless underpants on the floor and she saw him fondling children. You know what I mean?
I'd be
Can anyone be held to have... Can anyone be held culpable for that when you've watched that and seen that?
But my line on it is you remove your own self-defense. We are all justified to be suspicious at the very point you go into a bedroom with a child on your own. Sorry. That, you know, rather than us all attacking people who are suggesting abuse, I think one should start at the position of, Jackson, why were you doing that? I just think it's heinous. I think it's ridiculous. I would love to know as well, behind the scenes, how many non-disclosure agreements have been signed by how many of these people. NDAs have been around for years. Could some of the other children have been signed up to very lucrative NDAs? Could, you know, where they're not allowed to disclose any information, suits them. You know, how many of the staff have been bought out with NDAs? You know, the Jackson estate is still managed. You know, it's an incredibly... I mean, this could be the thing that terminates its profitability.
Lots of people there saying, until I see the evidence.
Yeah.
What evidence do you think is possible when somebody has been sexually abused? What evidence other
that's a
than
good point.
Truly believe?
What do you want? What will you get?
Is they gonna? Is it only if there's a video? If there's only if there's photographs? If there's only if there is pants with everything on it? You need everything on it. It would be almost impossible
what
to
evidence
take
is the right
anyone
evidence?
ever to court for any kind of sexual abuse.
I suppose someone else seeing something.
But how often is that going to happen?
Well, yeah, but I mean,
come on, how often?
But the thing is, here's what I think might be happening. You often hear hearsay that many people who worked for him did see something. I swear they will have all been locked down.
Okay, but forget about him. If that's the only way we're going to bring sexual abusers to court, is if there is some sort of physical evidence.
Well, no,
we ain't going to get far.
And the other way you do it, as they've done it and as they're doing in the sexual assault cases of Harvey Weinstein and what have you, and Kevin Spacey, they're looking at systemic repetition.
The same stories
happening across more than sometimes 10 cases. You know, it'd be interesting to see what happens after this documentary and all of the fuss it causes, whether more people come out. I think I might have seen somewhere that Corey Feldman has responded to the documentary, saying, you know, in defence of Jackson. So
yeah, that's true. Laura Coyle. He was accused of child abuse and carried on sleeping in the same room as boys. Why was that not enough for him to stop? Because he was compelled. It was compulsive behaviour. I mean, make no bones about it. He was extremely ill. Mentally ill to do this. Well,
here's an interesting thing. Someone's mentioned something there which we can't talk about in too much legal detail, but there is an inference, a little bit like there's been this suggestion of a paedophile ring at the heart of government in the UK for a while. And James O'Brien on LBC has worked long and hard to keep that story in the public realm. There's a similar story surrounding a paedophile ring of huge, far-reaching proportions in Hollywood. So it wouldn't at all stretch the imagination that, of course, many of the times that he was going to court and he was not being found guilty and everyone was checking him, you know, there could be an inside job there that's kind of sorting it all out for him. Could be, you know. I'm not a big fake lurid conspiracy theories, but, you know, as much as they could be lying, so too could the authorities.
With a new statement saying he can no longer defend Michael Jackson.
Oh, has he? I saw one from 2 days ago drop saying that he could. So, you know, I mean, this is the thing. It's one of those stories that's generating so many counter sort of, you know, bits of gossip and chat and what have you. I mean, I don't know. I thought it was a very unsensational...
I do think it's an important thing to keep saying they didn't get paid a penny for that documentary. 4 hours, how long would they have been filming that, Mark?
Ooh, that would have been, well, I'd have thought that would have taken, well, I mean, it depends. I mean, I'd have thought it would have taken a week or so of going back in. They're very intense interviews.
Perez posted the link earlier with Corey F. Now saying you can't defend him.
Okay, we'll go and check that out. Perez, your mate. Here's the thing. I thought as a documentary, I thought it was an incredibly sensational subject.
Warning bells outside the bedroom, I know.
Made and delivered in a very unsensational way.
You know, there's lots of people... I do. I think it was... I thought it was brilliantly done. There's lots of people saying here, and I've seen this all day on social media, the FBI went and looked at his house. Well, let me tell you something. What the hell was the FBI playing at? Because we saw shots of his room yesterday, didn't we? 4 bolts on the door. Everyone says there was 3 doors and a corridor with alarm bells.
Yeah, you spotted that. Your video forensic eye spotted evidence that no one had even mentioned.
But all the boys have said the same thing. Even Macaulay Culkin admitted to that.
For some reason, Peter Andre's name's flying up loads. Is he friends with the Jacksons or something?
Yeah, he is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you know, you can't be damned. Not everyone in the Jackson family is therefore, you know, guilty.
No.
But it would be interesting to know how they're protecting the Jackson legacy. You know, I mean, I know LaToya has been heard coming out about various bits and bobs. Yeah, the FBI aren't always an entirely trustworthy organisation.
Elvis Hone, the FBI didn't investigate. They provided resources to the local police. I mean, you know, come on, we've got to get real here. I mean, I have spoken over the years through my jobs and Mark to countless victims of sexual abuse. The amount of times things like the police came round, asked me whether I'd been sexually abused. Yes. I said no. The police left.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the idea that, well, the police have been, they looked round, there's no way it can be true because the police did come out. It just doesn't work.
But here's
like
one
that.
of the things that happened and is still ongoing around the accusation of a paedophile ring in the UK. Is that there was some inquiry was done. Do you remember this? And they said there's no evidence of a cover-up. I know this made me roar with laughter. When a cover-up is effective, there's no evidence of a cover-up.
That's the point of a cover-up.
That's the point of a cover-up. And this is why, you know, when you have money and when you have power and when you're plugged into the higher echelons of institutions that also have power, the balance is tipped against you. And you could see in this documentary how these boys and their families were in awe of a man on stage in their lives who was probably was the biggest celebrity on the planet.
He really
There's
was.
no two ways about it.
Lots of people are bringing up the Martin Bashir documentary. Do you
Oh,
remember
yes,
that?
yes,
When he
yes.
outed him.
Yes,
Do you remember that?
he outed him.
Well, I mean, he was very,
Yes.
what's the word? He was very, it was a grueling interview. And
Right.
Michael, I think,
Yeah. Louis
But
Theroux
we-
also came out today, didn't he?
but we all turned, do you remember the documentary?
I don't know.
I know, I can tell you.
No, I remember the Princess Diana one, but I don't
No,
remember.
the Martin, it was, he had the full tour of Neverland. He interviewed him, and it was a very strange. And yet again, we did turn a blind eye, didn't we?
See,
Rather like the mums.
okay, it's comments like this that make me chuckle. Pedro TV, how do you know that? That's all I want to ask, because you could, just as much as you could ask, how do we know he did it? How do we know he didn't? You can easily keep saying, how do we know he did? Okay, well, we can match that with how do we know he didn't? And what I would say in answer to that is, and that's my point, don't go into rooms and lock the door on your own with children if you don't want us to think you might have done.
Look at this.
Simple
Some
as
people
that.
would be afraid of backlash from Jackson fans. Jarvis Cocker, that was it, said he got death threats
Was that?
after he was getting on stage with him. Do you remember when Jarvis Cocker got on stage
Oh,
with him?
yes.
Do you
I know
remember?
at the Brits,
and said and
he
had
tried
the
to pull
thing
it all
about all
down.
the kids being on there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's been, I mean, I have to say, I do feel slightly shaken and stirred by the whole thing. It's like, I kept being taken back to moments in the 80s that I remembered so vividly.
Oh,
I mean,
that's right. Martin Bashir questioned why he was sleeping with a boy with cancer.
I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Come on, at
It's
what
all
point?
so
But
odd.
but the thing is, we all knew this was going on. So whilst on the one hand we can get sort of a little bit irate and say, how could he have gone into a room and slept with people? We all knew he was doing it.
Sleeping with people.
We all
well,
knew
the thing
Why
is,
didn't we
okay,
all-
let's take out the fact that he's Michael Jackson. Okay, let's just take the fact. And there's a bloke up the road there from us. He's got a big mansion,
Yeah.
right? And he's put a big slide in it and,
Yeah.
and a massive paddling pool.
Yeah.
And he gets movies and popcorns and
Sounds
all the
suspicious
kids.
already.
All the kids from the area go there,
He hasn't
get
done anything.
into
It
bed
sounds
with
suspicious.
him, get into bed with him, and watch movies and eat popcorn. What are you going to think?
Yeah.
What are you going to think?
What's your
You
judgment
can't
for getting it's
answer
Michael
that
Jackson?
without going, wow,
It's a bit
a
weird.
bit weird. Well, I
It's a
would be
bit
very
weird.
concerned about that.
Would
We
you
would,
send
but
your kid?
We were blinded
Very
by the
good.
fact that he was a star.
Yeah, and we all still, and I think a lot of people are hurt and upset
We
and
all
don't
are, 'cause
want
we
the
love
status
him.
quo rocked.
No.
We still want to listen to Billie Jean. We still want to moonwalk. We still want to do the Thriller thing. All those things they are cornerstones of my childhood culturally, and in a way they have been. I hate to use the word, but they've been sort of destroyed.
Somebody there said he groomed the world.
Yeah,
Wow.
but that was my feeling about Jimmy Savile. He had the barefaced cheek to look down the barrel of the lens and
my
invite children
Laurel
to
Nichols,
say,
thank
get
you.
this, I did it with my nan. I sent a photograph of myself with a letter to Jimmy Savile to operate the scoreboard at the Oval. There he is, probably sitting there, oh, little blonde-haired boy, let's get him in.
Because you had to send a photo in,
He had
didn't
to
you?
send a photo. I remember going to get a passport photo with my nan. Had the barefaced cheek.
Well, it's like that. It's like Jimmy said in episode 1 yesterday. that he had to do this audition, didn't he? And he danced his socks off because they got all these tapes from all over the world that they went of all these boys that were then sent to Michael. And he said, I was basically auditioning
to be abused.
That's what it felt like to him.
Shocking.
Of course, we're still
Shocking.
only saying this is what we get from having watched.
Yeah.
And and everyone is entitled to their opinion, and we do fully understand how painful this is for fans. We're fans of Michael Jackson.
Oh my God.
We're Michael Jackson.
As
Our
a family,
family's fan of
hang
Michael.
on a minute, let's not forget, Guardians of the Galaxy, ABC, easy as what, I mean, there's just too many tunes that define too many moments that it's just going to be, just a big
Olivia Brown says, anyone who believes the lies are extremely unintelligent.
What lies? Whose lies?
The lies of the
Michael's
the men.
lies?
I don't think
Who's
this
lying?
is. Do you know what, Olivia? I don't think this is about intelligence or lack of intelligence.
No.
I think it is about just sitting as a human being, listening, watching. We watched every single second. A lot of people that have been commenting on this, I might like to add, haven't actually watched the programme, I discovered.
Yeah, no, I've had an argument with someone and I said, did you watch it? They
They haven't
no,
watched
I know what it's about.
They haven't watched
Nothing.
it.
I know what it's about. It's just.
I mean, you just can't, because before we watched it, we were like, oh, we don't know what we're going to think about this, because we didn't know, because we hadn't seen them and we hadn't been able to make, to really look into their eyes and see what.
Yeah. Just as you can't prove Jackson did it, you can't prove that they're lying.
No.
And I hate to say it, we're going to have to stay in this oscillating place in between the two. But as I keep going back to, for me personally, there's just so many red flags that have all been stuck up.
Marie Williams, if you sleep with little boys, then you're asking to be called a paedophile.
This is it.
It was very,
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I suppose we live in different times now, don't we? But I mean, even as a father with children, and when you're ferrying them around in cars, you always make sure your own kids are in the car. You have to think about these things. But I do go back to our selective amnesia. We all allowed these predatory creatures to get away with it because they folded it into their act. They folded it into their profile. What gets me, and what's most sinister in a sense, what I found most sinister about the Jackson myth, if you like, was this idea that, yes, we know, well, we say we know he had a terrible childhood. How do we know? You could say the same thing. How can we trust Jackson had the same thing happen to him? If you can't believe these guys, can we believe Jackson? But this idea, this story that he was promoting, that he never had a childhood, therefore that's why he has to sleep with children.
Well, it's interesting because today at work I was saying to somebody who hadn't believed the guys, I said, and I did the same thing. I said, well, imagine if this was just a person down your street and had 100. Oh, but it's not the same. I said, why is it not the same? He said, well, because Michael Jackson didn't have a childhood. I was like, right.
Yeah.
So he created, and I thought, my God, this is that world that, that still doesn't make you all right.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have a childhood. He created
Yeah.
this palace for children.
Yeah.
It's still
Bizarre.
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 You know what? I'm seeing lots of people coming up there and just saying they feel so sad. And so do we. And there is a kind of grieving, isn't there? Because if you're a Michael Jackson fan, as we all are, and we love his music, and there really probably is nobody that can top him for his music and his dancing. I mean, just seeing that dancing again, he really was something off the scale, his talent.
Absolutely.
And it is really sad. And maybe that's why it's been so hard for this story really to come out in the way that it needed to. Because
But,
we're reluctant.
when people are, people get very, 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 it's interesting how angry people get on Jackson's behalf. I mean, none of this is going to harm Jackson himself because he's dead.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the only living victims of anything are these two and potentially many more.
Well, thank you for...
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of your comments. We'll keep
Absolutely,
the
Kerry
discussion going
Stone.
on.
Not everyone that has a bad childhood abuses.
No.
And not everyone that's been abused becomes an abuser.
Absolutely
not.
No.
And I think that must be so awful for people that have been abused to feel that that's what everybody thinks. So that's absolutely not the truth. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
It's a bit odd, isn't it? It's
It's a
been
bit
an odd
shitty.
week
No, it has been
with
a weird
old
one.
Kelly as well. It's just been
Yeah.
a bit horrible, really. Thank you for joining
Yeah.
us, and
Thank you.
we'll see you again.
Vlog is going up after this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Bit more
Anyway,
cheery stuff
bit
there.
cheerier.
Ah.
Okay,
All
take
right
care,
then.
guys.
Bye,
Thanks for all of your
guys.
intelligent commentary.
Yeah, we will
Thank
continue
you.
to read them all.